All right, welcome back to Adobe Lightroom Classic. And now we're really going to start to refine what we're doing here in the develop module. I'm going to show you how I see a photo and how I adjust, basically what I look for and what I do in my sliders. So we've got a series of images down here. Now, I might not fully tone all of these, but a lot of them are here for some specific reasons. We're just kind of gonna deep dive into what to look and how to adjust. There's one thing of knowing how to work the sliders, but the important aspect is how do you do it? What should you do? How far should you go? So that's what we're gonna take a look at today. All right, now the first thing that you guys should know is some of this is subjective. Look, anybody can have the same image and tone it in a variety of different ways. What I'm going to be looking at here is just your traditional image, toning it traditionally. All right, so we've got this first image here, and this is a JPEG image. And this is what I would call too far gone. Basically, the initial exposure with this image, especially because it's a JPEG, it's just too far gone. We've blown out the highlights. You can see there's no detail here, no detail here, no detail here. There is a little bit of detail in the subject. Can I save it a little bit? Yes, I can simply just come down here and decrease the exposure and get the subject looking a little bit better. But it's the background that's distracting that I can't really save. If I come in here and I darken this, what's going to happen is this white area is just going to turn gray and it looks really odd. It's not something that I'm going to normally try to adjust because I don't think it's going to be helpful. So let's go ahead and skip on over to this next image, which is this duck. So we have just a simple image that just about anybody should be able to photograph. But if you notice in this image, the water is really dark in this image and it blends into the duck. And then he's got this really bright white patch and bill. And a lot of what you're doing in photography is basically evening out the different areas. And how you do that is going to be dependent on your image. So I think it's important that you really listen to the wording that I use when I do this. The first thing that I always do is I'm going to always come up here and set the color profile that I want to use. In this case, it's Adobe Color. That's what I want to use. I'm not going to change it. The next thing that I would always check is as shot. That is my white balance. Now I could come over here and try auto just to see if I like it any difference. Truthfully, I didn't see any changes in it. Can I warm this image up a little bit if I wanted? Sure, we can warm that image up. But I'm just going to leave that alone for right now because remember, you can always come back and change stuff after the fact. This type of editing in Lightroom is called non-destructive. Remember, we're not actually physically changing the image. You can't actually change a raw image. All you're doing is applying settings and it's getting saved in an XMP file and you're seeing a preview of what it will look like if you export it. So the next thing that we're going to come down here is our exposure. So we know that this needs to get brighter, but there's an issue in this. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and show you. We're going to increase this brightness a little bit. When I do that, remember, this is what we call a global adjustment. It's making this little area kind of bright, but more importantly, an area that was already bright, brighter. And what will happen is you'll lose detail. So you never want to make a global adjustment, meaning an adjustment that affects the whole image if it ruins an aspect of the photo. So in this case, we're not going to make this adjustment. I'll come over here and reset that by using a double left click. Then we can come down. Can I lower my contrast? Well, I could lower my contrast. That's going to open up the image maybe a little bit or allow me to adjust highlights and those shadows better. If you have more contrast, it makes it more difficult to tone down or darken highlights and open up shadows. So you want to somewhat flatten your image a little bit so you can open those areas. You can always add that black back or that contrast towards the end. Next thing that we have are highlights. So we could bring down our highlights and darken them. But I don't know if it's going to be super helpful in this because it's only really a little teeny area. So I think I'm going to skip that. Now I can open up my shadows, and I think that's going to be helpful. That's going to be something global I think this whole image needs. So we can just open it up a little bit. And you'll notice if you have a properly exposed image or pretty close to, you're usually not making like these wild swings where you have your things like way out here like this, like that. That's not good. If you're doing that, there's something wrong with your initial image. But you can also see by doing that how much detail is in this image. So we're going to come over here and just slide these back. We'll just leave it like that for right now. I don't want to make any wild, crazy swings. We're going to not touch any of the rest of the stuff because I don't think it's going to be helpful. We don't want to adjust the whites, the blacks, or anything. The problem with this image, and with most images in photography, are they need selective adjustments, meaning adjustments that happen just in specific areas. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So we come over here to our masking icon and we'll click that. And now we need to decide what kind of a selection do we want. Do we want to use select subject? Maybe we want to select the duck. But this is the problem with the duck. It's got dark areas and light areas. So if I select the duck, one adjustment isn't going to work for it. I need to do a selection here and then a selection here if I wanted. So it's going to be two completely different selections. So select subject really isn't going to work in this case. All right. Could we select the subject and then remove areas? You absolutely could, but I don't really see a need for it. I don't think it's our best option. Select sky. That's another artificial intelligence. We don't have any skies. That's not going to help. It comes down to the fact that the one that you most commonly are going to use if you don't need to select a whole subject is the brush. It's just the easiest. So we've got our brush, and the key here, and don't be confused by my mouse pointer. Remember, the mouse pointer is blue. What we're looking at are the little circles inside, or if I make it bigger, outside. So I can tell right now my feather's a little bit hard, so I'm going to lower that. And when I'm trying to select something, I want to make it about as big. I don't want to paint outside of the area. And basically, I'll make a brush for here, and then I'm going to make my brush smaller and paint that bill. So we're going to come in here. And when I say paint, I mean we're just applying a mask to this area. And that's going to tell Lightroom, hey, this is the area that we want to affect. So I can come in here and do that. Now, right now, I'm in a mode that makes it difficult. So I'm going to hit Command Z. And I'm going to hit K again. That's going to bring up the brush. And right now, let's change that overlay mode to color overlay. And that's going to make it a lot easier for us to see what in the world we're doing. So now when I do it, it's painting that color overlay over the subject. This is the area that I want to affect. And don't worry, if you mess up, it's not a big deal. We can go ahead and remove areas just as well. You can see right here, I sort of went out of it, and that's okay. We'll come back in and fix it. All right, so I went out too far. So if I want to remove a selection, I'm going to hit subtract. I want to use the brush again, and I want a smaller brush. Now, normally I will zoom in, so I'll hit Command plus a couple times, and this just lets me kind of get a better idea of what in the world I'm doing, and I can come in here and start to remove that stuff where I just went too far. Just going to do it a simple way. You can see we're just saying, hey, we don't really want to affect these areas. And we can always come back in later and affect those areas as well. Looks like we spilled over into the black just a little bit in these areas. All right, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit Command minus and zoom back out. And now we're going to make that adjustment. So remember, that was too bright. This is important. You don't want to just come in here and adjust your highlights sometimes. Sometimes it's helpful if you even lower the contrast even more, because the flatter the contrast, the easier it is going to be to fill in specific areas. And you can see we're filling in or darkening in that one location, which is right there. Now, this is the problem. This area needs more and this area needs more. So what we're going to do is, because this area is already good, we're going to have to create a new mask. Now, we can't come up here and say duplicate the mask. So I can say duplicate mask 1. So now we've got mask 1 copy, and I can rename this, and I'm just going to call this Bill. Okay, so just so everybody knows what's going on. But I don't want this area. I just want this little white area here. So what we're going to do is click on Bill. We're going to hit subtract again, use brush, and I'm going to remove that area right here that I think looks good already. A little hard with my pointer in the way, but we'll just do the best that we can. So now we've removed that area of the mask. So now it's just the Bill and should be this little area here. So then I'll come up here, I'll select Bill, and then I'm just going to lower that exposure a little bit, just so we get a little bit richer color. I can try to lower my highlights to see if I like that, which I don't. So just going to leave that there, I think. All right, so that's good. We've evened this area out. Remember, we can come back in and adjust any of this stuff at any time. I can click on mask 1 and I can select it and I can say, hey, maybe I don't want that lower contrast, or maybe I don't want my highlights to be that much. I can come back in and adjust any of this stuff at any time, as long as you do not delete the XMP file. Lightroom saves these adjustments. As soon as you make them, it writes them to that XMP file. So there's no saving involved. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is notice we've got the duck here selected. And the next area that I want to work on is basically this outer area. But I do not want this area. I just want this water. So there's a couple of ways we can tackle this. And I'm going to show you the two ways, and then I'll tell you which one that I would most likely use. So we can come up here and hit create new mask, or you can just use the quick key K, which is going to be brush. And what we're going to do is apply the mask to everywhere where I want to brighten up the shadows. So I can just simply come in here with this big brush and we can just apply it. All right. Bigger the brush, the faster it's going to cover the areas. And then you can start reducing the size of that brush to be more accurate. All right. So we can come in here if we want to be more accurate. Now I want it bigger. And we did a pretty good job. Looks like we're a little thin there. That looks pretty good. So then I can come in here and I can open up my exposure first. So I'm going to open up the exposure to brighten that whole area up. I can see if opening my shadows up is helpful. Sometimes if you open up your shadows too much, it starts to become flat. But in this case, it doesn't look too bad. See if we open up the highlights, if that helps. Yeah, I think that gives it a little bit more pop. So that's looking pretty good. All right, so that's not too bad. I'll turn it on and off. If you click this eyeball that you see up here, right there, that's going to turn it on and off. So that's before and that's after. And you can see we got all this detail here. Now, the reason I didn't want to open this area is a lot of times I don't want the backgrounds to be too bright because we don't want it to really compete. We just want it to be part of the whole image. I think I'm going to darken this little area right here. And is it too bright? No, I just want it to fade into the background because I don't think it's an important aspect of the image. As we can tell, it's already out of focus. So if we want to add a new area, we can come up here, or in this case, I'm just going to hit the letter K. That will give me a new mask area. I'll just say this area, and we're just going to go ahead and darken that a little bit. Flatten it out, just make it gray. All right, so that looks pretty good. We're just dumbing that down. And one thing I did notice, if we look at our mask here, and let's go ahead and change the overlay to black on white. And if we click show the overlay, notice that my overlay is actually gray. It's because I wasn't paying attention to what I did. And the density of this mask is not at 100%. And so it made it gray. Now, if I was to come in here and repaint or apply this area, again, I could get it so it's white. And that's one reason I have sort of a strong adjustment because it's only doing about 50% of that area. So, hey, look, everybody makes mistakes. No big deal. Still got out of it what I wanted to. If I wanted to increase the density of that mask, that's something I could eliminate it or start over. But I think we're going to be good. Now, the second way we could have done this that we see right here And so what I'll do for this is we're going to go ahead and delete these masks. And we're going to attack this just a little bit different way. First of all, we got to see if this is actually going to work. So we're going to come in here, and you'll notice that when we did this, remember this mask right here is selecting this area. The area that we want to brighten up is basically the opposite of this. So if I come into this mask and I put duplicate and invert mask, it's going to make a new mask, but it's going to select the opposite. All right. So I'll call this dupe and invert. So dupe and invert. That's that mask. We'll take the show overlay off, and we're going to switch back to color overlay so everybody can see what in the world is going on if I click on it. Now, in the case of this mask, that the area selected is everywhere but here. But remember, I don't want this area to be adjusted too. So I can hit subtract, brush, and then come in here and apply that here. And if I click the show overlay, it will show me what's going on, right? So I've removed that from this location and this location, and it looks like I didn't have the flow up when I did this. So let's just go ahead and clean that up a little bit. Good enough. Ooh, missed that little spot right there. All right, so that looks pretty good. So now not this way, this way. So before we painted it in, and sometimes when you have to apply to a big area, it kind of takes a long time. So in this case, maybe just inverting a mask that we had already made and then removing it from this location would work. So in this case, now I can come in here and start doing basically those same adjustments that we did before. I don't have to make quite as broad adjustments because now we've got the density up on our mask. So you can see now I've done the same thing. Now I still have the mask up here for where I darken that up in here. So we don't need to do that again. But basically that did the exact same thing as I did before. I just went at the mask in a little different manner. All right, so let's go into another image. That would be wonderful if you would like to subscribe and get future videos as they come up, because I'm going to be doing a whole series on Lightroom right here. That would be great as well. All right, so we've got our next image, and we're going to do this one just a little bit faster so we can keep things moving. I don't think there's any brightness or darkness adjustments in this image that we need to adjust. However, the color is kind of reddish or maybe magenta. I'm not sure. So we're going to go to, in this case, Adobe Portrait, because I like a little bit flatter color when I'm doing with people. And we can come over here to as shot and we can try auto, and that looks way better. All right, let's see. I'm going to just slide this a little green. And I don't know if you guys have heard me say it, but in photography, you never want your subjects to be magenta. It's very difficult to get that color off of them. So I'll tend to make something maybe a little more green, yellow, or red, just so it's not magenta. All right. It's a little cool here, but I think we're pretty good for what I want to do for right now, because when we brighten this area up, it is going to adjust the color a little bit. We don't really need to make any global adjustments, because if I brighten this area is going to get too bright. If I darken this area is going to get too dark. So we need to do those independently. So we're going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to first go to select subject. So we're going to select our subject. It's going to do it, right? You can see where it's highlighted. And now we're going to brighten or open her up. So we're going to come over here, and I'm going to slide this, and we're going to open this up. I actually don't want to go too much because I don't want to make this arm too bright. So we've just opened it up a little bit, and then I'm going to open up the shadows a little bit, and we're good. We're probably going to have to make a secondary adjustment. We brighten that area up just a little bit. Let's see, it was there to there. All right. So that looks pretty good. So let's do another one. We're going to this time do the sky. So we'll give it a second. It will analyze that sky. We're just going to darken down that sky a little bit richer. And that's good. We don't need to make it look crazy dark or anything like that. We just want to even these exposures out. Now, we want to brighten this area up. Now, I've got two ways I could do this. One, I could manually come in with the brush and apply it, or I can do select subject again. which I think is going to be easier. And then I can hit subtract, brush. And in this case, I don't want to brighten or adjust this arm anymore. So I'm just going to paint that arm out. So I'm saying, hey, don't adjust this area anymore. And then I can come in here and I can start to brighten her up. Remember, I don't want to make her super bright. She does have a hat on, so we want it to look like there's a little shadow there. But this is looking so much better. We can see if we open up the shadows. Yeah, that looks good. So more even exposure, and that looks a whole lot better. Now, the color's a little off, so I can come down here. I'm going to actually slide, and this is difficult. I will tell you right now, if you're using Photoshop, do this in Photoshop because it's so much better. You don't really have a lot of control here when you're doing selective adjustments. But if I make this adjustment and I move it this way a little bit, I can yellow up her skin and change it from that kind of magenta color. So I don't want to go a lot. I actually just want to do like a teeny bit. So probably like 2 or 3. And I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to just desaturate that area, which is her body, just a little bit. And that's going to make it a flatter color. I do think there is a little bit of reddish magenta here in this area. So what I would need to do if I wanted to fix that was basically create a new mask and go in there and apply it and get rid of some of that reddish color. We're going to move on because I don't think it's important to be that specific. So let's come in here and take a look at this little sheep. And this is probably going to be the last one that we're going to do here. So overall, this was just way too dark. And that's not a big deal. If you have your choice of shooting dark or light, I would always shoot a little bit dark. So once again, we're going to do Adobe Color. I think the color balance is okay for right now. Let's see what it looks like when I brighten it up. And then we're just going to brighten this whole image up a little bit. And that looks a whole lot better. Next, we're going to come here and do a selective adjustment. So in this case, I'm going to do select subject. So we've got the little sheep and we're going to brighten him up just a little bit. I could actually come in here with the highlights and see if that's going to help a little bit, or should we just do the exposure just so he stands out ever so much. I actually am going to leave this area a little bit dark. I like the contrast between the two. Now I could come in here and darken the sky if it was something I wanted to do. So if I wanted to darken the sky, I guess I could come in and do it. So I could hit select sky. I could also give the sky a little bit of color if that was something I wanted to do. If I wanted to darken it back down just a little bit, so we have kind of a gloomy, you could do that. I don't think I would probably warm this sky up or change it. I don't think it's going to look better. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it as is. And this is looking pretty good. Now I can tell you right now, this looks good on screen, but if you were to print this, this would be way too dark. So let's go ahead and go back to the adjustments. Remember, everything is adjustable. So I'm going to come in here and just brighten everything up a little bit. In the case that you do not want to adjust the sky, want to just do it globally like I did, that would be the best option. I don't think that's working for me. So I'm actually going to go back to the adjustments and I'm going to go to the sky. Remember, we have invert and duplicate the mask. So we're going to duplicate and invert. And what that's going to do is select this area, not this area. Because what I want to brighten up is actually this whole area, but I don't want to affect this. So we're going to come in here and we're going to now brighten this area all up. And that looks so much better. All right, so if we get out the masking, I can come down here and show you a before and after. So this is what we had before. This is what we had after. Come to this one. Before and after. Here, before and after. And that's basically what I'm looking at when I'm adjusting images inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. I just like to take a moment to say the YouTube algorithm really likes it when you watch the whole video, you like the video, and you comment on the video. If you're finding the information in any of these videos helpful, if you could please give me a thumbs up. We do have a Facebook group, and there's a very specific reason I created this. If you want the information, it's in the description below. But a lot of comments I get, people are asking me questions and I cannot help them because I need to see what the issue is. Facebook allows you to either post an image or a video, and it makes it really easy for me to give you the answer to whatever your problem is.